You've lost that love and feeling. Whoa, that loving feeling. You've lost that love and feeling, and it's gone, gone, gone. Whoa. Nah, I'm just kidding. Top Gun's fun. Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and this time you made me watch Top Gun. This is a movie that was requested by John Matthew McLean. Thanks a bunch to you, John. This is a movie that I actually had seen before, and I think this is the first time I've ever done this, where I've reviewed a movie on this show that I was actually already familiar with. But I mentioned that to John, and he was like, yeah, I kind of want you to talk about this anyway. And I think that was probably because the sequel, the decades later sequel, Top Gun Maverick, which is the most obvious title possible for that, is supposed to come out later this year. Hopefully that movie doesn't get pushed back like so many things are right now. It's slated for June at the moment, and so this is, of course, the right time to be talking about Top Gun. I'm very curious to see what that movie is going to be like, and if it manages to match the tone of the original, if it's the same kind of crowd-pleasing sort of movie, or if suddenly it's going to take itself a great deal more seriously and try to be more of a sophisticated kind of movie, or is it going to be a little bit paint by numbers and kind of standard Hollywood schlock like I think Top Gun is. So I'll just jump right into my feelings on Top Gun, and we'll like I did in the teaser, flip my sign green, because I do enjoy Top Gun quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. It's a movie that never sticks with me. I didn't grow up with this movie. I just saw it, you know, in the background of life. It was everywhere. I mean, it was the big Tom Cruise thing, really until Jerry Maguire, I guess. And then that's all anybody was talking about with Tom Cruise. But, like, I remember Hot Shots being a thing, the parody of Top Gun. I remember the NES video game. It seemed like all my friends liked this movie, and I remember, you know, the Need for Speed being a thing that people would quote all the time. But somehow I just never ended up seeing it, and didn't, I guess, really have much of a desire to. I've never been a big fan of naval things and military things, and I kind of avoided war movies growing up. Just the aesthetic of them. It wasn't violence. It wasn't like, I don't like looking at airplanes or whatever. Like, that didn't excite me or anything, but like, I wasn't repelled by that. It was really just, I think as a kid, colors. You know, I was a big Star Trek fan. I liked like bright primary colors, and you get into military stuff, and everybody's wearing like forest green and gray and navy blue, and it was just boring to me. I couldn't get excited. Everybody's wearing the same thing, and that always bugged me. It always felt like everybody's supposed to be exactly the same. There's no individuality, and that's not necessarily exactly what's going on all the time in military things, but that was the kind of the way I perceived it. It bothered me. It was like, you go be in the military and now you're a drone and your mind is not your own, and that always just kind of freaked me out. And so I didn't look at a lot of things like this. And I think if I'd grown up with this movie, I would probably have more affection and affinity for it than I do. I get why it's as popular as it is. This is one of the quintessential 80s movies, of course. It's worth a lot of the love that's thrown its way, partly for the soundtrack and partly for the inarguably brilliant dogfights. The plane choreography and the way that's filmed is just absolutely spectacular. And if you don't know what's happened or what's about to happen, and I didn't remember everything from this movie going in on this viewing because I haven't seen this in several years, there are some real tense, you know, sit on the edge of your seat kind of moments. And this is, of course, the kind of movie we don't make anymore. The formula of both the action hero formula and the romance formula with this movie are still very much intact in a lot of Hollywood things, and is kind of a lot of the problem with Hollywood these days, is that these kinds of schlocky movies that some of which, and I don't know that Top Gun is doing this, but some of which kind of are emotionally manipulative and pretend like they're more realistic and more believable and more sophisticated than they actually are get put out, and we're just kind of telling the same story over and over again, and we're kind of careless with it, and it's built on a whole lot of contrivances and things. So movies like this, I think, did kind of hurt us in the long run in like lowering our standards for what good stories are and what good dialogue is, and whether characters really need to act like real people, what that even looks like. I'm not putting all that at the feet of Top Gun, but I'm saying that movies like this got really popular, and we thought of that as, well, that's what a story is. Not just what a, fun, somewhat brainless action movie is. I'm not saying this movie is entirely brainless, and I'm not saying that there's not compelling things about it. I just don't think it's especially sophisticated, and I don't know that it's trying to be. I'm not completely sure about that. Top Gun wants to be pretty realistic with the naval stuff, with the dogfights, with the airplane stuff, with the way the Top Gun program works. This was not based on a true story, but it was based on a lot of disparate real elements. So the Top Gun program was a real thing. The love interest is based on a real person, and so it's kind of odd that it's as kind of rote and in some places trite as it is, when in other aspects, mostly in the military stuff and in the aesthetic of it, it is trying to be very realistic. And so I think that's where somebody like Roger Ebert, who only gave this movie 2.5 stars and was pretty harsh on it, he said that the dogfights are great, but beware when people start talking to each other. I don't go quite that far, but I understand why he was frustrated that way. And I remain of two minds about it, because on the one hand, I kind of enjoy sometimes a thing like this that is just really charming and unabashedly cheesy, and does not care that it is. And this does not feel like a realistic movie to me. And then on the other hand, like I said, but then people start to think that this is what good stories are. And it's got certainly elements of good stories, absolutely, but it could have been a great deal smarter. And this is certainly not an example that I would lift up as a great romance, but boy, it's close. Like all the trappings are there. I think Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis, I always forget her name, have chemistry in theory. That's kind of an odd thing to say. Like, I don't know that these characters have a lot of chemistry. I think these actors absolutely do. I don't feel like the script is quite matching, and some of the things they have to say to each other is quite matching their acting ability and just the natural rapport that those two actors have with each other. But then there are flashes, there are moments. I like that opening scene a great deal. I think it's a little bit too easy that he falls for Charlie, this woman who the very next day is going to be, almost dressing him down in front of, well, I guess that happens a little bit later, but he's going to find out that she's that she's evaluating the pilots at the Top Gun school, and that she is going to have something to do with how well he does there. That's a little easy. If that was the only kind of contrived thing, it would be a little bit easier to swallow, but there are several of those all the way through the movie, and I'll talk about that a little bit. By the way, I'm going to spoil Top Gun. I'm not going to really worry about spoilers with this, because this is a 30-something-odd-year-old movie, and most of us, I'm sure, have seen this. 60, yeah, this is 35 years old, and anyway, so that's a little bit easy, but man, that first scene is incredibly romantic, and one of the few things that I think is a little bit unpredictable and uncallable, that he doesn't right away manage to get her enamored with him and sleep with him. I mean, I guess she is interested in him. She would have to be for how quickly they finally do get together, but she's there with somebody else. That's confusing for a second, because it seems like, or is the idea that that's not actually somebody she's dating, and that she's just trying to not let him in on what her job is. Maybe that's what's going on. I'm not actually totally sure what that guy was doing, but it looked like they were doing business together. So maybe he was working at the flight school, and they were just there to have drinks and do business. I'm not actually sure what was going on there. I'm sure somebody can tell me. I don't know this movie real well. I've seen it a couple of times now. But anyway, so he tries to he hits on her, and he tries to get her enamored with him so that he can go through a bet. It is a real typical kind of macho 80s scene. I'm gonna get her to sleep with me tonight, and you're gonna owe me $20. And real chauvinist looking thing. People would consider that very sexist now. That sort of thing was more acceptable back then, and we looked at it as more charming than I think a lot of our sensibilities now. But the bit where he sings that song, you've lost that love and feeling, is legitimately charming. It's a wonderful scene. It breaks me up. I love that, and I think it's a lot of fun that it doesn't work. I think the issue with the romance while I'm there with this movie is that it ends up being too easy because it doesn't work right away, and I'm impressed with that he's going to have to work for it. And then he doesn't really have to. A couple of scenes later, they're already in bed together, and it's like a real typical steamy Hollywood love scene. There's nothing believable about it. And again, I get that this is a kind of I don't know if heighten's the right word, but it's not a real realistic movie, but I'm having a hard time appreciating that because now it feels just obligatory. It's just, these two people have to sleep together because that's what happens in movies like this, and you're supposed to just be enjoying that, as a guy, and maybe a guy and a girl, kind of vicariously. I wish I was, in one of their shoes in this moment, whatever, and I wish this was, this was how romance worked in real life, where it's kind of a wish fulfillment fantasy kind of thing. The problem is it's a little smarter right before that. I'm really worried as I'm talking that I'm going to talk myself out of the argument that this movie doesn't mind being as kind of cheesy as I think it is, and it actually does want to be smarter than it is, and the script's just not good enough. I hope I don't talk myself into that. But anyway, so they get together, and like I said, too easily, and I feel like it would be a great deal more compelling as a romance if Tom Cruise's character, if Maverick, had to find himself before these two people could even be together. What if they weren't sleeping together when Goose gets killed, when he loses his partner on the plane, and he loses his confidence and he has to find himself? What if they were just, like, friends who were romantically infatuated with each other, but were both professional enough to not go through with it? She says this is. They keep saying this is very complicated. One of the repeated lines in the movie is this is going to get complicated. It's not a good idea. She's a professional. She says I never date students. And she makes an exception for him because he's Tom Cruise, because he's the protagonist of this movie. I'm not saying that he's not charismatic and charming, and I get if she's... I kind of like the idea, for instance, that she's interested in him because of his arrogance, that, like, in public, she has to say, you are too dangerous and the stuff you're doing is not going to fly. You keep violating the rules whenever you do some of these stunts, and you leave your wingman and all that kind of stuff. But behind closed doors, and she tells him this when she has to dress him down in front of everybody in public, and then I love that it's so over the top. I love the bit where he gets in his motorcycle and he drives off while she's trying to talk to him, and she won't have that. She's like, you're not going to treat me like that. She's a pretty strong lady. I mean, I like that a lot. She jumps in her car. She almost causes a traffic jam, and or she almost causes cars to hit each other, and she darts down the street. It's like the closest thing we get to a car chase. It's not a real car chase. It's just he's in a motorcycle, and she goes down the block, and then, no, we're going to finish this conversation. I like that a lot. That's a fun scene. But she says, I think you are a great pilot, and she sees why he does some of the things he does. He is too reckless in some cases, and in other cases, he's breaking the rules when he thinks it's appropriate because people's lives and his airplane are more important than just doing things by the book, letter of the law, just so that you don't lose some points in some class. Like, he doesn't care about the bureaucracy. And there are places where he seems to do stuff just to show off. His name, after all, is Maverick. Like, throughout this movie, his superiors keep wanting him to be more of a team player, and they're like, you can't do everything on your own. It's that teamwork message. But then his call sign is Maverick. You know, you think they make him change his call sign. Like, well, I'm just, living up to my name. My name is Maverick. It'd be like if your name was Rogue, but you were supposed to, like, always work with other people. I guess that is true with Rogue and the X-Men. She works with other people. But you know what I mean? Like, your name is Maverick. Your name is Rogue, but you're not expected to be a Rogue or a Maverick. But anyway, so I think it would be a much more compelling love story, and it would have been less predictable, and it wouldn't have felt so trite if they had this affection for each other, but they didn't act on it, and their relationship was, throughout most of the movie, about his abilities and his accomplishments, and her wanting to see him fulfill his full potential. Look, Maverick, you can beat Iceman. You can get that trophy. You can get to the top. And I believe in you. I'm not going to sleep with you, but I believe in you. And you think that you have all this confidence and all this arrogance, but I can see right through you, Maverick. You're terrified of your family name because your dad was disgraced, even though it turns out that he was a hero, but nobody knows that, and you feel like you have something to prove, and you're overcompensating, Maverick, and you gotta quit doing that. But then, after Goose dies, and this does happen, she comes to him and says, well, you've gotten really good at quitting. And I guess Maverick, that's what you're gonna do. You're just gonna quit. But you're better than that, and you should keep going. You need to learn to move on. That this wasn't your fault. As reckless as you usually tend to be, you didn't actually cause this. Now, arguably that is true. I could see the argument that he and Iceman are both somewhat to blame because they're kind of their rivalry does have something to do with why Goose dies. Like, it's not the tailspin, his spinning out and not being able to get out of it when he hits the backwash of Iceman's plane. That's not really anybody's fault, except Iceman was in the way, and he was trying to. This is during a training exercise. He's trying to get a ping on the plane that he's going to try to take down, and he would have had a clean shot. But Iceman is if I'm remembering the scene right, Iceman's in front of him. He's like, Iceman, get out of the way. And so you could argue like maybe it's partially kind of Iceman's fault. Nobody talks about that. Maybe if Maverick had been more of a team player, he could have let Iceman have that shot, and they could have just worked together, and, points be damned, but that didn't happen. So, like, I can see an argument for it. Neither of them are completely not to blame. Like, it's all very indirect. What they were doing was not exactly dangerous, but if Iceman hadn't been there right when he was, and also maybe I don't know if I'm right about this, but like maybe if Maverick hadn't been so stubborn about the whole thing, that wouldn't have happened. But that's very like, coulda, shoulda, woulda, like with hindsight. Obviously, the point of the game is to win, and they keep making a big deal out of no points for second best and stuff. So I guess it's not really anybody's fault, but like at the same time, that rivalry did lead to that. But she's really upset with Maverick for being a quitter, and I think all of that works a great deal better if she is looking for an eventual excuse to get to be with him, and they are not a couple until the very end of the film. I think immediately that's a better movie and it's a better romance if that's the case. And you can have your steamy love song in the background still leading up to that. You can do all that stuff. You can have that great karaoke bit at the beginning. You can bookend with it like we do. I think that final scene where, like, I love this scene. When she shows up at the end and, like we don't see her, we're not sure if she's there, but somebody puts a coin in, this is the very last scene of the jukebox, and it's playing that song that he sang at the beginning. He's looking around for her, and then finally she's there, and they're gonna gonna get to be together after that. Like, wouldn't it be great if they hadn't slept together yet? Wouldn't it be great if, like, it's kind of a coming-of-age story, right, to a degree? Like, he's got to find himself. He doesn't know who he is without his father, and without knowing what happened to his father. He doesn't have that role model influence, and he's just kind of groping around trying to figure things out, figure out who he is, and then he loses his friend, and he's now lost his confidence, can't even decide if he still wants to do this and what to do. And so it's all about confidence, and it's all about learning how to move on from tragedy, and how to not blame yourself for things that aren't your fault, and to continue on even through grief and all of that, to learn that, in a job like this, and in something dangerous like people are going to die, you're going to lose people, and there is a greater good. And he discovers that greater good at the end when he has to go on a mission, and he saves his friends, and he saves Iceman, who's not his friend, and that's why they come to appreciate each other at the end. And like, that rivalry is really typical until you get to that last scene, and then that chokes me up a little bit. Like, I love the bit with him and Iceman. Like, I think that is actually pretty well earned finally. But man, that love story is such a better thing if only it's not. It would still be a love story throughout, but just they don't hook up until the end. They're not allowed to be together until the end. Another thing that that's my biggest criticism of this movie. The other thing that hurts it for me, that hurts the love story, well, okay, that combined with, like, contrivances are my biggest criticisms of the movie. I can accept some of the contrivances a little bit more if it's just a schlocky popcorn movie, but, like, now I'm looking at that love story and I'm going, that could have been, like, so much more compelling. And I don't know why you would sacrifice that just to be kind of a fun, dumb action movie that we've seen 100 times. So, like, I don't know. I may be turning myself around a little bit on that argument. Like, it is one of the better of those, but it also could have been a much better, good, sophisticated drama and romance and even action movie. Then you get to the soundtrack. And I like the songs in this a lot. I grew up with this music. Like, you didn't have to see Top Gun to know Danger Zone and to know that love theme from this movie. It takes my breath away. But what is silly about that is that that song keeps coming in and out of the movie, and it will interrupt other pop songs to then come in. It's like, now it's the romance part. I think it's unintentionally hilarious. It just keeps cracking me up. I started counting how many times it would come in and out of the movie, and it does it 4 times. But it might as well have been like 9, because the 4th time, then it just keeps going for a really long time, and it just gets that song stuck in your head forever. And, like, it's not supposed to be funny, I don't think, but it really cracks me up. Like, it feels like a parody soundtrack to me, and it cracks me up. So that, I don't know, that hurts that a little bit, but it's very funny. I also enjoy it for that, because it's hilarious. This is one of my wife's favorite movies. She made me watch this a few years ago, and, not like this. She didn't, like, give me $15 and say you had to watch this, but she had always wanted me to see it, and I finally sat down and watched it with her. She is a big fan of 80s and 90s action movies. One of our favorite movies to sit down and watch together is Under Siege, because it's hilarious. And if you've never seen Under Siege, watch that for Tommy Lee Jones' villain performance, because he is freaking hysterical in that. There's this guy in that movie that is obsessed with meat that we call Meat Guy, and Sarah and I have a lot of kind of inside jokes with that movie. So we like to watch these kinds of movies together, and I think I probably enjoyed this more watching it with my wife, who's just got this big grin on her face the entire time when we watch this movie. And I totally get what she sees in this. I'm sure if I'd grown up with it, I would probably appreciate it more. But for whatever reason, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't really stick with me when I watch it. The stuff I remember from this movie is Take My Breath Away will not stop playing. It just, whenever I think it's gone, it's gonna come back. It's gonna rear its ugly head again. And, obviously some of the really great airplane action, which is undeniably wonderful and visceral and gripping and fantastic. And that's pretty much it. Like, it just it doesn't stick with me, and I think that's because, again, it is kind of a predictable film. It is kind of, plug in for a formula. It's not confusing. It's not like it doesn't make sense. It's not like it's not like there's no character arc. Like I said, it's about a guy who's overcompensating and feels like he has to be, insanely arrogant and take a lot of risks and things in order to get past the reputation of his family name, and then that kind of flips toward the end where he realizes that maybe he doesn't have the stomach for this. We have this really great kind of textbook opportunity for change in. I think it's great in that last scene with the dogfight where he does the thing that the guy at the beginning of the movie does, where he freezes up and he almost can't even land the plane. This guy at the beginning, and he's like, "I've got this son I've never even met yet. I could have died in this fight at the beginning of this movie. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't handle it." And at the end, Tom Cruise, Maverick, almost has that, where a similar thing to what happened when Goose died happens, where there's a tailspin, but he's able to pull himself out of it, and then he's like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I want to be here. But this time the stakes are higher, and they're being fired at by Russian planes, and he's I think Russian, and he's gonna get killed, or by pilots are gonna get killed. So like they need him. He's indispensable right now, and he's basically got that moment where he can either choose to be what they thought his dad was, or be his father. And I wish we knew more about his father. He's a real blank slate. We just know finally that he was a hero. It was classified, and nobody was allowed to know that. And that's a horrible way to remember someone. Just because you have to classify it because of, again, bureaucracy, or because we don't want. It's real vague about what exactly happens, which I kind of like. I like that we're not mired down in the details with that, but we're told that it happens over a certain line, and they don't want the country where it happened to know it happened, and so, if I'm understanding that right, and so they have to let everybody think that Maverick's dad was a coward, and that's horrible. And so, like, I really feel for him with that. And in that moment, he can be a coward. He can let his fellow pilots die, and he can be a disgrace, or he can do what he knows that his dad did. Now, I would argue that he doesn't necessarily need to find out about his dad in order to get to that moment. Maybe to get back in a plane in the first place. I don't know. The whole thing is pretty contrived, is the problem. So it's hard to say if he really needed that to get back in the saddle, or if I might have just bought his girlfriend giving him that pep talk. Like, maybe that would have been enough. Like just, look, you need to move on. You were not yourself. Did he have to know for sure that his father wasn't a disgrace? Like, what if he had gotten back in the saddle and he'd won at the end, and then, like, regardless of, you've gotten past your family's name, like, regardless of what your dad did, that doesn't matter. Like you've made a name for yourself. The problem is that it's kind of arbitrary, right? Where I could have seen this going so many different ways. The way it goes, it doesn't feel necessary. It doesn't feel earned, and that's kind of a problem, because it's kind of the obvious way to go. And if you just get rid of some of those contrived scenes and you let the story unfold more naturally, then it wouldn't feel so, again, paint by numbers. So here are some of the contrivances that bugged me, and I'll work my way backwards. So right at the very end, the Top Guns are graduating. Iceman is the real Top Gun, and there's no points for second place. but Maverick, Tom Cruise's character, is still like one of the best guys, so there kind of is still points for second place. That does, it does still matter. By the way, before I get into that, I've been wanting to mention this. It kind of bugs me that there's sort of a teamwork message with this movie, or at least it kind of bugs me the way the Top Gun program is run, because they say there's no points for second place, it's all about the top dog, but have each other's backs, and make sure to work as a team, and make sure to help each other. And those seem like mixed messages to me. You're telling your guys that they need to be in constant competition, and that the only thing that matters is winning, but also, as important is to make sure you have each other's backs. I don't understand how that results in anything but disaster, and it kind of does. If I'm reading Goose's death right. So anyway, the seconds after they graduate, there is a incident where the Top Guns are gonna, or the graduates from that program are gonna need to ship out immediately and go on a mission. And that seemed like pretty convenient time, just right away, because we have to hurry up and rush to that moment where Tom Cruise finds his confidence again, and lead us to the moment where he throws Goose's dog tags, representing his ability now to move on. Couldn't you have just had a timestamp where it's like a couple months later? Like, did it have to be that very day? And then, here's another one, again working backwards. What are the odds that Tom Cruise's XO, or whatever, his superior, would be the guy with the classified information about his father, that he would just happen to tell him the moment he needed to know that? Like, he doesn't go to his house to get that information. He just is that Viper. He just knows in that moment, if I tell him this, then it might get him to start to snap out of this a little bit. Like this could be my job, but I need to. It's paramount to get him back in an airplane. That seemed too easy too. So there's some moments like that. Another thing I wanted to mention is I appreciate a movie like this having all of the characters talked about mostly through their call signs, because it's just easier to remember. So you got characters like Maverick and Goose and Viper, like that sticks with you. Jester, I remember these names. It's a great deal. It's like the X-Men. Scott, Storm, remember these names. That's pretty easy. I can remember these names. So that's the thing that I appreciate about movies like this. This is one of those things where it's kind of like a lot of genre movies where we get lost in a world that we're not familiar with. So this is a real world place, but because we're not usually there and we don't get to see these things, it's kind of the same thing as other schools that train people in more of an alien setting. It's like going to Hogwarts, or it's like going to Starfleet, and that's one of the things, one of the trappings in the formula of this that's always kind of fun is you get to go to a world that you're not familiar with, that seems kind of alien, and see how these people are trained and changed, and they get to live in this kind of dangerous world of adventure that you'll never get to see. And a lot of those worlds aren't real, but this one was. It's interesting because we're at the very tail end in '86 of when we're even having these kinds of battles in the air. We don't do, aerial battle like this anymore. And we still have planes, but when was the last time that there were dogfights that even happened? And that makes me really wonder how the sequel is going to be handled, because as far as I understand it, we don't really do this kind of thing anymore. I don't know if something like the Top Gun program would even be a thing now. But anyway, like I said, I've been talking a long time, so I'm just going to flip my sign once again. I'm feeling it. I enjoyed this movie a lot. It is, again, it's wonderfully schlocky and cheesy and stuff. And not realistic, and doesn't have to be. And on the other hand, it could have been a better movie had it been that, I think. It's certainly with the romance, but it's a lot of fun to watch. It just is somewhat disposable in my brain because I don't hang on to it. It doesn't stick with me. Let me know what you guys think about Top Gun. Leave your comments, and thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.